I'd like to introduce you to our first panelist, which is Charlie Papazian. Now, I'm sure all you are brewers that this is a familiar face. Charlie, yeah, welcome to SEA Brew. I'm glad I've been asking Charlie for a while, and we've never managed to. The stars have never managed to align for Charlie to come and join us. But it's great to see you, even if it's virtually. It's great to have you on board. Hello, Charlie. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I'm okay. I'm here. Great. And glad to be here. Wish I could be there in real. You know, I guess we all wish we could be there in person, wherever you were going to have the event. But this will do now, and I'm sure there's a lot to be gained by the discussions and the presentations that you've lined up for the next few days.
Oh, well, I hope so. I hope we've been out to the industry and asked what people would like to, what people like to listen to. So we hopefully we've got a good lineup of water chemistry, of fermentation, hops, malts, marketing, so everything that we hope that's going to be of use to the industry. So a quick introduction to those who may not know Charlie. Charlie, you were an engineer, weren't you? Trained nuclear engineer.
Yeah, I have a university degree in nuclear engineering, and I followed my passions at various times. I was a school teacher, and then I started the association, American Home Brewers Association, and all the other beer events, starting in the late 70s. And here I am now, retired from the Brewers Association in 2019 after being involved with them intimately for 40 years. It all seems to have gone in a flash, but a lot has happened in those 40 years. And wherever I go in the world, it's kind of a mirror mirror to my past. Various countries and various areas are in various stages of development, and wherever I go, I can say I remember that time in the U.S. There's a lot of challenges. There were a lot of challenges then, and then people are facing the same challenges, and maybe that's a few of the things we can talk about in the next 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, that was, I guess one of the things I really wanted to focus on for this talk was your work with the Brewers Association, because I think that's kind of very relevant for what's happening at the moment in Asia. The craft beer industry really is in a very early stage, the very early stage of development. And you started the association right at the beginning of everything, didn't you? Just after, was it the year after Jimmy Carter changed the regulations on small batch brewing? You started the Association of Brewers.
That's right. That's right. For a home brew, the home brewing became legal in a federal level in 1979 when it went into effect. And I had coincidentally started the American Home Brewers Association in December of 1978. So I was following my passion. I really wasn't involved with the passage of that legislation that legalized homebrew. There was already a community of home brewers that were making beer. And as I think we all realize that if home brewers and beer enthusiasts are involved and passionate about what they're experiencing, the idea of starting a brewery usually evolves in a lot of people's minds. And that's what exactly how the microbrewery scene, as it was first called in the USA, how that emerged. And it was by and large mostly home brewers that had this idea, and their friends saying, you make good beer, you should start a brewery. And they dove right into it, not really realizing the challenges that they were going to encounter.
So why, I guess one of the things I want to ask you is why, I mean, you were one of the early home brewers, and you were very active in the homebrew scene. Why did you not make that jump to brewing yourself, to open up a commercial brewery yourself? Why did you decide to go down the association route as opposed to down the brewing route?
Well, the brewing route didn't exist at the time. There were maybe one or two, possibly three breweries in California that I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
Am I still on?
Yes, you are, Charlie. Yeah, sorry. There's a technical problem. I think Youichi may have your feed, so that might be causing a problem with his sound.
Okay.
So carry on.
Yeah.
Youichi, can you hear us, Youichi? You can. Okay, great. Carry on, Charlie. Right. Sorry.
So yeah. I will continue briefly here. Why didn't I pursue a brewery? Well, after 40 years, many people have asked me, why didn't you start a brewery ever? Did you ever think about it? And I have to admit that, of course, yes, I did think about it a lot, and I have visited probably over 1,000 breweries in my lifetime and all over the world, and I know intimately the challenges and the successes and the failures that people have experienced, and I, after seeing all this and thinking about it a lot, the reason why I did not start a brewery is because I thought about it a lot and realized that, it was not the same thing as being a home brewer, and it was it is a challenging business. And my first love was really about teaching people. I've always been a teacher. I've written books, as you know. I've written stories and articles about beer and brewing for over the past 50 years. And that's what I really got a satisfaction in. That's what I was really good at. And, when you go down the road of being a craft brewer, you're not home brewing anymore. Your life changes, your business, you have a business plan, and that business plan is always in flux depending on what you experience. You have a whole new world of challenges, and I experienced viewing a lot of those challenges, and I decided, I'm pretty happy and satisfied with where my passion lies. Being involved with an organization that champions the interests of brewers, both amateur and professional.
Because you talk, you quite often you talk a lot about community. That seems to be a huge passion. It's that opportunity to bring the community together through the association. Was that really the driving force of setting the associations up?
That's right. And in those days, early days, we did not have any other choice but to develop a community, because there was really no information or no network that could provide information for small batch brewing. So the people who were involved in those early days, it was a collaborative experience of making a lot of mistakes and going forward with the little knowledge that we did have. We had more experience than knowledge, and sharing our successes and sharing our failures and sharing our challenges. And that was true for the home brewers, who also had their community, and later on the community of craft brewers, professional brewers, developed as well. And that collaborative spirit has evolved even to this day. There are different reasons to collaborate here in 2020. But back in the late 1970s and through the 80s and 90s, it was essential to collaborate because we had nowhere else to go. There was very little support. Textbooks, publications, conferences, there weren't any that provided the needs and the perspectives that were of any value to craft brewers. So we had to embrace ourselves and rely on each other.
Is that? Let me just bring Rohit in here. Rohit, is that something that you're seeing being mirrored at the moment? Because I know Charlie was saying earlier that he's seeing what happened in the US mirrored all over the world, in the communities all over the world. Is this something that you're seeing in Hong Kong and around Asia when you travel around Asia?
I think absolutely right. I mean, in principle, obviously, it's a couple decades later, and we had the benefit of a lot of information available on the internet and so on, but that does not take away the importance of community, especially in the early days. In Hong Kong, I mean, I started as a home brewer as well, like many of the other brand owners, brewery owners today. Around 9 or 10 years ago, there were a handful of us. We'd meet, exchange home brews, and that's kind of was the beginnings of a small community. And eventually, some of us decided to open beer-related businesses, whether it's importing and distributing, or tap rooms, or breweries and brands, and it continues to this day. We were chatting a little bit earlier about, how so many startups have opened across Asia, including Hong Kong. There are 30 odd brands. And this is really a 7-year-old phenomenon. And a lot of the people involved in the scene are the ones who are also part of the very early kind of home brewing amateur community. Of course, with the benefit of internet and the benefit of learning from global experiences, the time frame of this development is a lot more compressed and a lot shorter. But it's kind of in principle mirrors a lot of what Charlie described earlier.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that groups of brewers in various areas in various countries have is the whole idea of collaboration and getting along with each other. You're selling beer in the same market, but I think it's essential for small craft brewers, wherever they are, whether they're in Asia or Europe or Africa or whatever continent, wherever they are, that craft brewers' competition is not the other craft brewer. It is the large manufacturers of beer that control the distribution and the retailing and the marketplace and control beer drinkers' thinking. And that is what your competition is. It's not the next craft brewer on the block or on the street. I always observed that there was always, when the early brew pubs and small microbreweries would open, and then another one would open up right down the street in the same town or the same city, there was a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of worry. But what happened every time was the more small breweries in a city or a town, the more vibrant the beer culture became and the more successful even the very first breweries became. So it's a different, you're not competing with each other, you're competing with the mindset of what the beer drinker perceives as being beer, and that whole education process, which our association and many other organizations are all about. Whether we throw a festival, it's not necessarily to make money, but it's to educate the beer drinker to think along the same ways that craft brewers and their passion have about what they're doing with beer and malt, barley, and hops.
Youichi, can you hear us now?
Yeah, sorry.
Great. Good to have you join us. Great to have you along.
Sorry.
Yeah. No problem at all. So, Youichi, are you seeing this in Tokyo? Because I remember last time I was there, I was up there last year. There's more and more small breweries opening up. Are they all helping each other? Is the fact that you're having more craft breweries opening in the city and all around Japan, is that really helping the industry develop?
Yeah. In these 2 years in Tokyo, about 50 small breweries start to brew, and now it's going outside from Tokyo. So every small local city going to have a brewery now. So people say in 300, 400 breweries in coming 2-3 years.
Are you saying, because keeping an eye on the news wires and what's happening and what's happening in the industry in general, you do see developments looking for microbreweries to open up in there. They see it now as a draw. If you have a development, maybe a food and beverage area or even a housing area, they actually look at having a microbrewery in that area. They see that as a positive thing to draw people to the area. Are you seeing that in Tokyo and?
Yeah. Yes. In Tokyo, lots of small brewery in official area, but official areas business not so good. And residential areas of Tokyo's breweries are becoming more popular in this. Yeah.
Was that something you saw in the US, Charlie? That as craft beers have become more popular, they've become a draw. So big developers are saying, hey, we want a craft brewery in because it's a draw to bring people into the area.
Yeah, there's various reasons why that perception of being a draw evolved. Some people call it beer tourism. Some people call it, helping and redeveloping neighborhoods or parts of cities that were run down. It's a lot of breweries they couldn't afford high rent districts. They couldn't afford the expensive real estate. So a lot of them began in very poor areas of cities that were desolate in some cases. And it was that anchor, the first successful business, and people would come, and once the brewery was established and people would go there, other businesses began to sprout up, and city developers and city governments recognized that, so they became much more inviting to developing the idea of a craft brewery in a particular town or a neighborhood. And then of course there's beer tourism, and that's one of the things that is a strong point for many of the state associations in the United States. There are 50 craft brewers, state craft brewers organizations, and a lot of them really spend quite a bit of time on marketing the idea that their state is special because of the personalities of the breweries and the environment which they brew, and the kinds of beer styles that are available. And so you get beer tours, and people just will design and get inspired to go on a vacation just to visit breweries. And that's good for not only the brewery business, but for a lot of other businesses that are nearby.
Yeah. Was that, because I've mentioned that to, I remember in Vietnam. So I think that Saigon or Ho Chi Minh is a fantastic place to start developing that kind of thing, that kind of beer tourism. And I think obviously Hong Kong and Tokyo as well. So the major cities in Asia are now really, there's a lot of breweries coming up. There's a lot of possibilities as beer tourism, but the tourism authorities in those areas laugh at it. Really, they don't look at it as anything very serious. Craft beer is still viewed as a bit of a joke. It's not a serious business. And a lot of the large organizations just look at beer as beer. They expect people, are you just going to drink beer? You're going to get drunk. Why is somebody going to visit a brewery like that? So there's not resistance to the idea of beer tourism, but they're just ambivalent, or they're just not interested at all in it. Did you face that with state governments in the US to start with? Why would you do that?
Absolutely. That's the natural progression. You have the old school way of thinking, and eventually it takes time. Things don't change overnight, and they don't change in a few years. It takes decades to maybe it's a little bit more accelerated these days with the way information travels, but you had resistance from local authorities, the local regulators, the local governing authorities. You had local business people that were just very skeptical. And now you come to our, the Craft Brewers Conference here in the US or the Great American Beer Festival, and there are cities, big cities, whether it's Chicago or Orlando or Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Michigan. They have booths and they're promoting their city at a conference. Now that was totally that was not anticipated as far as them being that engaged, that they wanted to put out that our city is welcome, as a welcome place for craft brewers to build and develop. So they recognize that that has been a very important economic driver for their towns and cities. And I think whether it's Vietnam or other countries, once there are enough beer enthusiasts that are flowing from one craft brewery to another to enjoy beer, and there's enough beer tourism, people are going to waken up and things will change, because it's, in part, it's for them, it's all about the money and bringing people in to part their dollars. And when you get more people coming into the country just because of the beer, not necessarily just for the beaches, but for the beer, you're going to be bringing people with money, and they're going to enjoy not only the beer, but they're going to be enjoying food, going to theaters, going to shopping, going to the market, and that's a very real experience that anybody who is very serious, all they have to do is look at other parts of more developed craft brewing communities like the United States and see what happens.
Yeah. Rohit, do you see this developing in Hong Kong? Is it have you worked with Hong Kong tourism and spoken to them about this kind of thing?
Yes, we've had dialogue with the Hong Kong Tourism Board, and like Charlie said, I think it's taken some time, but they do kind of, involve us a lot more these days in discussions about, things, especially kind of in the COVID timeframe, and when, borders do reopen, they've kind of been preparing for lots of these things. They throw this thing called an annual event, which obviously became a virtual event this year, called Wine and Dine. It used to be entirely focused on kind of the wine trade and restaurants and so on. Hong Kong has been a wine wine trading hub for a long time in Asia. But I think in recent years, they've gradually expanded their exposure to beer as well. And they've started to see it as more like as a core offering. And there's obviously a lot of Hong Kong brands as well these days. So I think they do see it as a part of what the city has to offer. But yeah, it takes time for not just government authorities, but, old traditional businesses, whether you're talking to kind of F&B groups or, hotels and so on, to start embracing craft beer, but it's definitely happening. And I feel like I can't speak for Japan, but, in most of the rest of Asia, it feels like we are at an inflection point, and that awareness seems to have reached enough of a critical mass that hopefully things grow more rapidly from now on.
Yeah, because I think Asia is developing so fast. You look at, for example, the latest trends in the US with the sour beers, with the Brett farmhouse ales, these kind of beers. I guess, Charlie, you started in 1972 with your home brewing in 1972, and then the craft breweries really started in 79, and it's taken you 30 years, 40 years to get to the stage where sour beers are accepted and part of the brewing culture, whereas Asia's done that. I think Rohit 7 years. I mean, Youichi, it's Japan's been doing that. I guess Japan had one of the earliest craft beer movements, but again, still very rapidly, everything's moved along very quickly.
I started beer brewing about 25 years ago.
Hmm.
So first 10, 15 years, my business and craft beer business in Japan, terrible. But after 2000, situation changed to be good. So now we craft beer business people become very, very, very happy. And many young people follow us. So very, very good situation, I think, at this moment.
Yeah. And Charlie, I know you you like your holidays in Thailand, don't you? You've been there. I know Brian very well
Yes,
up in
anytime.
Bangkok. Are you amazed when you go to Thailand at the kind of brews that they're making, having again only really been brewing for maybe 5 or 10 years? So the kind of brews that they're producing.
I'm astounded at the challenges they have in order to do what they do.
Oh
First,
yeah, well documented.
the legal situation there, but yeah, the beers that I've had, most of them have been really excellent, creative, and there's a sense of Thai culture that is endearingly infused into what they're doing, which is important, because I always say this, that you know. I saw this in Japan, Youichi, in the very beginning when Japan was emerging with wanting to do microbreweries and craft breweries. There was very little information for Japanese people to learn about brewing. So what happened was that expats from Germany and England and sometimes the US, but mostly Germany and England, were hired to brew the beer for Japanese microbreweries. And so, and in the early days, those beers were a reflection of German culture and English culture and a little bit of American culture, but not too much Japanese culture. And now you go to Japan and there are Japanese brewers who are very skilled and excellent brewers, and they bring their culture and their personality of their community into the beers that they make. It's very representative of the environment that they're brewing. But before that happened, it was a very difficult time. As Youichi mentioned, it was terrible. The beer was good, but it wasn't a reflection of who the Japanese people were and their Japanese culture of food and drink. It was a reflection of someplace else that was very foreign to people. I mean, so once the Japanese brewers emerged with great skills, you saw big things to begin to change.
Yeah, because I think the brewers are now working very hard to include local ingredients and put in, it's all over Asia. You're seeing, there's a fantastic array of ingredients being put into beers, and as a result, it's amazing beers are coming out. I mean, I know Rohit, your Chachang sour that you produce?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Charlie pointed out very accurately. I think it's really important to be locally rooted to create something distinctive. I think a lot of us who started breweries in this part of the world didn't necessarily want to do just an English brewery or a German brewery or an American brewery that happens to be in Hong Kong or Singapore or wherever else, but it needed to have, it needed to be inspired by what's around us. And that could include ingredients, it could include process changes, it could include a wide variety of things, or just sort of thematic inspirations from the food and beverage culture. So I think, for example, you pointed out a Tatanteng Goza. That's a simple Goza, and we add salt cured lime to it. It's a straightforward idea, but I think the resonance for the community here is huge, because it's a classic drink people drink in local coffee shops. They take salt cured lime, mix it with 7-Up, and that's like a everyday drink. And the moment you translate it into a beer form in Goza, it just speaks to them in a way that, you know, just a Goza wouldn't. And it just, we initially did it as kind of an experiment as part of our one-off program. But it was so popular that it's one of our sort of, you know, core frontline beers now.
Hmm.
Yeah, excellent example.
Yuichi, do you have beers like that? Has your beer repertoire grown? Because I see nowadays you have many more beers as regular staple beers. My go-to is the Dai, which has some oranges, an IPA with some oranges in it, isn't it? And that's I've had too many of those.
Our top three beer is one is Dai, made with local orange skins, IPA style, and second one is Yuzu Lager. So Japanese local yuzu very popular. So second top is Japanese fruit beer, and top sale is white ale. It's not local ingredient.
Yeah, but that's always been your big seller, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what you did. You won a World Beer Cup many years ago with the white, didn't you?
Yeah. Many years ago. It's more about 20 years ago. I got gold medal. Belgian wheat beer style. I learned a lot about competition and judging this 25 years. And it's about middle of 1990s, I learned a lot from Brewing Association. Charlie sent a teacher to Japan. I learned beer tasting style. It's very good and it's from Ray Daniel, I remember. It's a very educational, and we could make a little success after that. So I'm very thank you, Charlie, and your our brewery's dedication. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So is that kind of actually one thing I did want to ask you, Yuichi, is were you in the US when you won your medal? Did you get the famous Charlie Papazian fist bump when you picked up your medal for the World Beer Cup? You weren't there. No, you missed out. So
no. I was I couldn't believe my beer can get medals, so I have never been the reception.
Oh, I never went. So we live and learn.
Yeah.
So Charlie,
at the time, I knew who he was, so he was there in my mind when his award was presented.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. So is that something that there was a focus on with when you were involved with the association, Charlie? Could you step down as president in 2015? Was that right? But still,
no, 2019.
Okay, so you say president January, all the way through to.
It's been about a year and almost 2 years now.
Okay. Almost. So you say president all the way through until you step down. Yeah. And was that a focus as well? Well, not the primary focus, but working with other associations around the world. Was that something that the Brewers Association wanted to do to help grow the culture and help other countries with their culture, or was that just a kind of a byproduct of what you were doing?
I think that was in my mind, it was important to do that. For me personally, there was so much to learn from the experience of teaching others about beer culture and about brewing and about beer drinking and legislation and rules and regulations and everything that goes with that. And you never can stop learning. And in my, there was some questioning. I think that, why is Charlie going to Japan or Germany or this place or that place when we have enough challenges here in the United States? Well, you have to constantly expand your perspective and continue to learn and take into consideration what's happening all around you, especially as the global market began to evolve. And this was important for not only brewers, but suppliers of ingredients and equipment. And the encouragement of collaboration and cooperation, which is a really hard thing for brewers to do. I was always encouraging that, but that was something that I enjoyed doing. I enjoy traveling. I enjoy the experience of learning from others in various cultures. But United States is a big country. It has 50 states. It's what, 3,000 miles, 7,000 kilometers from coast to coast. And there are various cultures. And I was traveling from one coast to another, and all 50 states I've been to and visiting breweries, and each one of them had a perspective, a local, regional perspective. And to understand that, it was really not that different than going outside to other countries. I mean, geographical borders are just are really lines drawn on maps. It's not, the opportunity to learn and expand your knowledge and get new ideas. I brought so many new ideas about how things could be done back to brewers here in the United States. If you look back at the New Brewer magazine and Zymergy magazine, I often wrote about my travels and the new ideas about beer, brewing, marketing, legislative, culture, back to American brewers. And you have to, if you're in this business, you always have to continue to learn and be aware of what's happening all around you. It helps you get through challenging times, and it helps you get through successful times, even as we're in this COVID-19 experience. I mean, those brewers who have traveled the world and have had all kinds of various diverse challenges, those are probably the ones that are succeeding the most, because they can put those experiences at work in adapting to a new situation, because they've seen so many different situations.
Is that a real hallmark of the industry that you see? It's just the ability to adapt, because I know the US industry has had to overcome a lot of regulatory challenges. And you see that as well. Obviously, Thailand has regulatory challenges. I know Youichi was telling me earlier on that in Japan, they've managed to change some regulations with regards to takeaway from tap rooms because of the pandemic. Do craft brewers always, you see that they always have to be adapting. They always have to be ready to change.
They have to adapt. Almost all successful craft brewers are persistent. They never give up, and they have to be passionate about what they want to do and what they perceive or the direction that they're going. There's so like you say, there's so many challenges out there. Some are expected, some are planned, and many are not planned for, and you have to adapt to them. Even in the beginning, it was most common to be called crazy if you wanted to start a brewery, because there was no path, there was no textbook, there was no information on how to do that. And the regulations and the infrastructure of the beer business for for craft brewing and microbrewing, small brewing, was non-existent. It was non-existent. So how could you put together plans for a brewery where there was no market to begin with? It's like producing a product that has no market for it.
Yeah. I mean, you guys, Rohit, Yuichi, I mean, have you guys been told you're crazy and you're going to fail? And what are you guys doing?
No, I think in the early days, absolutely. I think because this kind of thing had not really been done. Charlie used the word microbreweries earlier, which was kind of the first wave of, the predecessor to the modern craft beer movement. That did exist in Hong Kong. Back then, it was a lot more about, having kind of a standard set of 5 or 6 beers, still different from, macro lagers, but they tended to be replicated pretty much all over the world. And you could walk into any of those brew pubs and they were essentially the same. But this sort of culture of creating something that's a local brand, that's, doing something interesting and different, that definitely had, I think generally the industry didn't believe it could succeed. But, it took a lot of persistent effort, and it took usually kind of, often with these things, you get 1 or 2 breakthroughs, and then that opens more doors. But until you get those kind of step function breakthroughs, you feel like, there's a lot of effort, but you're not seeing the results, and then suddenly a door opens, and then you're at the next level, and so on.
It's just that persistent, dogged persistence to keep going, keep going. But
yeah, I think on the other hand, though, I think specifically in Hong Kong, we've been fortunate, although it didn't feel that way in the beginning. Regulation-wise, it's actually, relatively speaking, fairly straightforward. It's not quite as onerous as, and it's not even taxed as many parts of the world. Whereas when we go to mainland China, I think they're going through their own regulatory changes, and we do some work there as well. And setting up breweries there is a much higher threshold. And I think, those things hopefully get more simplified in future, and then kind of in some of the larger markets outside of kind of the main cities, there's much more prevalence of authentic local brands.
yeah. And Yuichi, I mean, you must have had this. You have a 180-year-old sake brewery.
Yeah.
And it was a very strict and regulated industry, and you started brewing beer. I mean, they must have thought you were utterly mad back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Do they still think you're mad?
When I decided to start beer brewing, I became happy. I don't know why the reason, but I still happy. But this today I learned I remember that when I was 19, I educated and invested. I need to keep going. So I need to more education. I learn a lot. I want to learn a lot because though I'm very old, but I need to learn.
Is that what you feel, Charlie? The same? You just still want to learn.
Yes.
That's the fun part of being in this business, is learning. I still go visit breweries as much as I can. Even now, I'm not really retired, but I'm still involved in beer. I don't get a paycheck anymore, but I do visit a lot of breweries, and every small brewery that I go to, I've never been to, I walk out so excited And I say to myself now, I've never seen anything like that before. People are doing business, have a different kind of business plan. They're making different beers. They're using equipment in different ways, and they have different ways of presenting their beers. It's just, it's so refreshing that people are not just copying what somebody else's business plan is, their model is. There are still a lot of people out there doing very different things in the same city. You know, that's why there's so many success, you know, lots of breweries can succeed in a very small area, at least here in the United States, because there's an element of doing things your way differently and coming up with new ideas. It's really, really encouraging to me.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Rohit in Hong Kong, is that, would you say that's the same in Hong Kong? Because I know if you look at Saigon, Singapore, yeah, all the brewers are doing different things. Yeah, I think Hong Kong is probably one of the most developed markets in terms of flavors and different flavors. Are you really seeing that different breweries are kind of starting to specialize in different areas?
I think so, more and more. It didn't necessarily start that way. I think when we started, because there wasn't you know, much else going on, so we felt almost a responsibility that, you know, that we need to kind of bring many different styles in front of people to showcase what beer can possibly be. So we basically started doing a wide variety of things, you know, some completely designed from scratch beers, a few classic styles, and kept rotating them. And for us, that's kind of become a part of our identity, that we people expect us to constantly do new things. I think in recent years, as sort of the craft space has evolved, we've now seen breweries specializing in certain styles. There's, like, for instance, a lager-only brewery now. There are some people who are doing a lot more work on kind of sour beers, and a significant percentage of their volume is that. You know, there are all kinds of models. We now also have a hard seltzer brand in Hong Kong. So we've kind of seen, you know, a lot of specialization in recent years, which I think it points a little bit to what Charlie was describing, that people are finding their own way of doing things in their own niche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the seltzers are coming.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's just that they might be part of statistics, and a lot of breweries will be able to help their business, but it's not beer, and it's not the same person who's drinking seltzer that is wanting to drink craft beer necessarily. So you just a little bit of a warning is that when you start making seltzer and you grow, that's something that the big brewers are going to do too. So you're going to be competing with big companies. I don't think big companies can compete at the small level when they're with their craft beers and craft brewers, because that's different. It's a different culture. But hard seltzer is another sport.
Yeah. So hard seltzers come with a warning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to wrap up in a moment, but before we do, we have a couple of questions. Because I said to people, if they want to put some questions to you, we get those questions to you. We have one from Doug Piper, and he has a question about the challenges of Kveik yeast. I think this is directed to Charlie, particularly. He says, my surprise is there are only a few brewers really leveraging Kveik. What do you think it will take for home brewers and professional brewers to embrace Kveik's amazing fast fermentation capabilities? I know, Charlie, if you can have a stab at that one, and I know Rohit's probably got an answer as well to it.
Well, Kveik yeast is pretty amazing, and it's a very, very warm fermenting yeast, which the one thing to realize and remember and know is that there are different kinds of Kveik yeast that will give different flavor profiles and different characters to beer. The ones that I have had in a warm climate in Florida, for example, they were chosen to make lager beers in 3 or 4 or 5 days. And I really couldn't tell the difference between a 6-7 week old traditional lagered beer and the 5-day Munich style Helles that I had. It was just as smooth and had the same character as that 6 or 7 week old traditionally brewed lager. But there are different kinds of yeast, and you just can't pick one off the shelf and expect it to produce what you imagine. You know, just like brewing beer, you have different shaped fermenters and different brew systems and different environments. You will get different results. So it will take some experimentation. And I suspect, Doug, that maybe why it hasn't taken off yet, maybe is people think it's, well, I'll try this once and see if anything works. And it's not that kind of endeavor. You have to do quite a bit of research and experiment and figure out what it is you're trying to achieve and see what's out there and what it will do. The one thing that I've talked about is that for somebody who wants to make a lager style flavor in a beer, you know, you would only need 1/5 the real estate, the floor space, the size of a brewery. You could make lager beers in record time, or lager beers that taste like lager beers in record time, with so much less equipment and so much less overhead as far as real estate. So there's potential, but I think that, you know, generally throughout the centuries, the brewing community, whether they're small or large, they become quite conservative. And when they have a good thing going, they don't change very quickly. They don't immediately always embrace new technology. I've seen that over the years, but it eventually trickles and someone figures it out and becomes successful, and then people want to copy that.
Rohit, yeah, I had a Kvike beer that you produced last year, I think it was, up in Hong Kong. What's your take on Kvike?
Yeah, I think we love the different strains of Kvike that we've played with. We made a few beers. And so we have 2 breweries. One is kind of a smaller batch brewery. That's where we do a lot of our kind of one-offs and so on. And that's where we've used it. We have thought about using Kvike in one of our kind of mainline beers in our larger brewery. We haven't quite made the leap yet. And, you know, as Charlie pointed out, I mean, real estate in Hong Kong is key. If we can turn the same tank over a couple of times in the same time frame, it's a huge win for us. It essentially could double our capacity. Having said that, I think making sure that, you know, one of our kind of largest selling core beers, whether it's say a double IPA or a lager or a goza, making sure it's flavor matched with a completely different yeast strain in the larger system is something that'll need a lot more work before we are able to do that. So I think the approach we might take is, you know, get more familiar with it with kind of our one-off beers, and then maybe, you know, try it out and then slowly kind of see if it actually works on that scale or not.
Yeah, so it's more.
It's not only producing the character you want, but it's also, you know, these unknowns about, well, will this beer have the same kind of stability that you expect? Yeah. Or how will our packaging line affect, you know, different beers, you might require different types of packaging tweaking, you know, so there's all kinds of things that are unknown all the way to you got to think all the way to the beer drinker. You know,
yeah, a lot of experimentation and testing.
Yeah, especially if you don't pasteurize or sterile filter your beers, I think that part is extremely important.
Yeah, you're still putting a wild monster into a can.
Yeah,
wild monsters don't like to be canned. Youichi, one for you. It's from Felix Haggad. He says he loves your beers. Do you use local barley and yeast to achieve such a unique flavor and aroma in your beers?
Yes, we are using local malts and hops. Many hop grower burning. So we have too much hops. So we need to sell fresh hop beer. It's very tough to sell fresh hop beer to my business as sales.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We are using both local hops and local malts. And but malt is very, very expensive. Japanese malt companies only two big breweries, Kirin and Suntory, and both are very expensive.
So it's very difficult to produce cost-effective beers with if you're buying malt from the big guys.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. But you try your best to use the local products.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Charlie, one last question. We got Oliver Woods has signed in from Saigon. Actually, that mention of beer tourism has got his interest piqued, and he was saying, what do you think is the right supportive relationship between government and craft beer would be an ideal world to support beer tourism?
After we had that discussion, it's great you brought that question up, Oliver. We in this brewing world, we tend to focus on what we contribute to the whole idea of beer tourism. But, beer tourism and the whole idea of local beers and people coming for that purpose inspired a lot of food tourism, because back in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, in the United States, for example, microbrewers were promoting drink local ingredients and creativity and culture, and no one would listen. But now it's 2020, and you have small companies, whether they be ice cream or coffee or yogurt or miso manufacturers. I mean, there's small companies competing with big companies. Now, the thing is that organizations have done is to educate the consumer. We have done it as educating the beer drinkers, but like the whole slow food movement has been, and they almost copied what craft brewers did, is they, part of what food people do and wine people have done and small brewers have done is educate consumers of food and beer and wine that there's added value, there's value, higher value to a bottle of beer that's made by a small manufacturer in a small city, in a small community. So because consumers have gradually become aware that there's higher value, they've also recognized that they're willing to pay a higher price, which back in the 70s, beer was beer, and why would you pay more for one beer over another? Because all the beers were the same. And it's this whole educational process. Why should brewers get together in a country and agree on something together? Well, you have to agree on promoting yourselves as a group and the value of what you have to offer, each and every one of you. And that beer tourism, if you want to change government's attitudes about beer tourism, bring in the producers of the small producers of food and other things. And that is the same, they are having the same struggles as you have. And if you can connect all those groups somehow, maybe not in one organization, but maybe various organizations can be a communication, then the government will begin to listen, because maybe, small miso manufacturers in Japan resonate, or it makes more sense to support them in Japan than small brewers. And so, but you're all in the same boat. You're all trying to raise the value of what you do in the people's minds. That the cheapest is not necessarily the best. And there's a lot more value in not only your taste experience, but a lot more value to your community, bringing more jobs and more revenue into smaller communities rather than to bigger corporations. And the bigger corporations are still going to exist, but there's room for small companies to do their thing as well.
Great advice. I think that's fantastic advice to not just collaborate with other brewers, but to collaborate with the food manufacturers, the small suppliers, just everybody work together to work with government bodies to develop the industry.
Right.
Charlie, thank you ever so much. I'm going to wrap this up now. I appreciate the time that you've taken to come and join us on a Sunday evening your time, isn't it? So it must be time for a beer for you.
It will be.
It will be. Well, thank you for holding off for a few extra moments for us. Rohit, thank you very much for joining us. It's been fantastic hearing what you're getting up to in Hong Kong, what's going on in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for having me.
And Youichi, thank you. I'm glad that we got those technical problems sorted out and you could join us in the end. So thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thanks everyone for tuning in.